Good morning. I'm Jim Check with Kelowna Now. Back in Kelowna, finally home from Las Vegas. With me on the phone, Ian Burns, managing editor, all the way out there in Ottawa. Good morning, Ian.
Good morning, mate.
Are you ready to go? Lots of Trudeau stuff as usual. He seems to be dominating the news more so than ever. This time, though, Danielle Smith taking the lead, though. Danielle Smith traveled to Mar-a-Lago and then had a couple of mates there with her. Jordan Peterson and Kevin O'Leary, and they got actually audience with Donald Trump.
Yeah, but she's just on CBC this morning, and it seems like she didn't succeed in any way at all because she said that she thinks Trump is absolutely still going to go ahead with the 25% tariff on all Canadian goods going into the US, and she sort of bemoaned the fact that this will essentially destroy Alberta's economy. Very gloomy interview that she gave this morning.
Yeah, I think Canada is best suited by getting a new mandate from the people and a new leader. Like we can't have this like this lame duck thing going on. Very, again, we'll talk about it later, but very selfish of the Liberal Party to continue to do this while we're at really huge economic risk right now.
Yeah, but I mean, it's increasingly becoming important, I think, to ask the question, what can we do, even if there is a new government, a strong one with a strong mandate? What
Well,
can Canada actually do in this situation? Because Trump really seems hell bent on this stupid policy of his, doesn't he?
Well, we don't know that for sure, but what we do need is somebody that can actually negotiate, right? We have nothing right now. We have, premiers going down there negotiating, and they can't really negotiate on behalf of Canada. They can negotiate. I mean, that just splinters Canada more.
Yeah, that is a very strange situation. Though they do have a sort of forum for cooperation, don't they? And they're going to be in Washington. I think it might be this week actually,
Right.
or next week. They're going to go led by Doug Ford this time, and they're going to make their case. But it seems like Trump is absolutely adamant on this, isn't he? But he's not wrong, Trump, when he says that historically the US used to fund a lot of its services with tariffs. We're talking like in the
Hmm.
19th century here, that sort of time. And he thinks, I think he has an ideological commitment to tariffs. And if that is the case, I don't know what negotiations can achieve really. If he's absolutely committed to that, it's going to be very, very tough.
Well, one of the things for sure with him is that he likes to like negotiate with a very heavy hand and typically backs off. So we'll wait and see, I guess.
Yeah, that is true, and you can take some solace in that. But then that's a lot of what people are now referring to as Trump won, as in his first term. And he
Hmm.
does, people have noticed, everybody's noticed that he's a bit different now. And not only is he different, but the circumstances are different. There seems to be a lot more strength and a lot more confidence surrounding the sort of Trump regime.
Yeah.
And I would be I would be rather worried. Yeah, I mean I think everybody reliant on the US economy should be worried. And unfortunately, we are the most reliant on Earth, pretty much.
And then one of the things, though, like our biggest strength is what we have downplayed for the past 10 years or so is our natural resources. That's what they do need from us, right? They don't need our manufacturing and stuff like that. What they do need from us is our natural resources. That's what the world needs from us. And we need a government in here that will actually utilize our natural resources for the betterment of Canada.
And that's also a good argument to get down, get your hands dirty and make some companies that actually matter, you know?
Yeah.
If we were in a position where if we were in a position where Canada produced, lots of irreplaceable products, like all that value added that we keep hearing about, you have to think maybe Trump would be a bit more reluctant to make
Yeah.
these noises about a tariff. But I mean, the thing that I've not heard, I keep hearing talk about oil. The Americans have got more oil than Canada. They don't care about oil. I mean, obviously it would be a massive inconvenience and it would shoot inflation up for 5 or 10 years. But they can live without our oil. What they can't live without is what Saskatchewan, the jewel of Canada, produces, which is uranium and fertilizer, potash, and also BC actually with the lumber. Those are the things that the Americans can't really replace. I mean, especially uranium. And yet I haven't heard any threats about that. But I feel like if the Americans were to be told, we're going to basically remove your ability to produce nuclear reactors or nuclear weapons. That's a pretty huge threat.
Yeah. Like I said, I think that we need a mandate and a leader that can negotiate on behalf of Canada because we don't have that right now. Canada Post stamps got more expensive and a lot more expensive. 25% increase. Crazy.
Yeah, it's a lot. And I mean, this was decided before they had the recent fiasco, which is unresolved, isn't it? Still
Yeah.
the labor dispute. But they just say that this reflects the true cost of doing business now.
Yeah, I mean their market gets smaller and smaller, so I guess the economies of scale gets tougher and tougher for them too. So, like it's going to get tougher and tougher for them, and I don't know a lot of people that are mailing stuff either, but firm proposes class action suit against Costco Canada. Says that accuses it of unfair pricing in Quebec. Says Costco charges more for items sold online than sold in store.
But they do actually, I mean, it's in the articles have covered it. Costco does tell you that if you go on their website, they
Yeah.
actually say that the prices might be different. But I mean, I guess it's the argument is that it violates a Canadian law. I think it's a Competitions Act. So we'll see what happens about
Yeah. As long as their hot dogs stay at $1.50, everybody will be happy.
that. Maybe that might be their counter threat. If you go ahead with this suit, hot dogs are going to go to $5. Then I think everybody would be up in arms, wouldn't they?
So they're trotting this story. I've seen in many places. Will the Conservatives, with the Conservatives promising defund, could the next election kill the CBC? And he's not threatening to kill the CBC. He's threatening to defund the CBC. The CBC does generate revenue. I mean, there's some of the programs that CBC does, generate revenue. It sells advertising now as well. So, but they do take a lot from Canadian taxpayers, and they give out some very generous bonuses to their management teams.
Yeah. Well, and also their reporters, to be fair, they get paid considerably more than their comrades in the private sector, I think, for what they do.
Yeah. Well,
Better pensions as well, I believe.
we've been a training ground for them. We've lost a few reporters to them because obviously we don't get any funding, and we can't compete with their deep pockets because they reach their hands into your pocket and my pocket and take out whatever they need.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens. I mean, Polyev, he hasn't said much, frankly. He hasn't said much about anything really about how he's going to govern. But on this subject, he said that he wants to maintain funding for French, Radio Canada, their broadcasts, because he thinks that's important for some reason. I don't really know why. He didn't explain. And other than that, he wants to cut the English side pretty massively, actually. And I just, it'd be quite hard if he did cut a substantial amount of their budget. That's going to throw them into a crisis, isn't it? They're not going to know what to cut, and they're going to have so many arguments about what to prioritize. So I don't know. I mean, that could be the end. It could kill the CBC as we know it, anyway.
And then you put this one up there that it's again a CBC article. Um, I don't want to be a Karen. Maybe you can
Well, I
explain.
just thought, these articles, they should be packaged together, I think. Could the next election kill the CBC? And the implied question there is, why would you kill the CBC? And then the next thing here is, here's a column. They very rarely give columns to anyone at the CBC, as I'm sure most people are aware. But here's a column of a woman talking about how, in her own mind, white women get better treatment than her, and that she has to become, in her terms, a Karen. She has to go to the Karen Academy to learn how to complain like a white woman because apparently they get better treatment in life, which is a quite peculiar conspiracy theory, but there you go.
I think we've had enough Karens in the world, no?
Yeah, well, it's odd that the CBC would do this. I mean, Karen, that kind of burst onto the scene a few years ago, and I think a lot of people used it unwittingly. They used it without thinking about it. But a lot of time has passed since that emerged on the scene, that term. And I think
Hmm.
more serious people have now realized that it's a racist epithet. And, you don't have to go far in search of quite serious discussion of it on those terms. And then here's the CBC, which, I would say prides itself on being anti-racist or some sort of modern term like that. And yet it's given corn space to somebody who uses racist terminology. Quite peculiar, quite odd, I would say.
Um, the California wildfires, Alberta, British Columbia, and everybody's sending people there. Alberta, British Columbia. Something's going on with
Quebec
my
as well.
computer here. What's that?
Quebec are also trying to help.
Yeah. Fall wildfires. Lots of. What's the death toll count at now?
I think it's 24 now, but I think there's a lot of mystery surrounding that, isn't there? Because I mean, not to get too into too much detail, but it's quite hard, isn't it, to identify remains in these fires. So I think that that's very much a provisional number, 24.
Yeah. Um, and lots going on there for sure. Back to Trudeau. Melanie Jolie says she's willing to cut off Alberta's oil exports to the U.S. in response to Trump's tariffs.
Well, as we just discussed, that I mean, that could have the potential to backfire as well, couldn't it? Because if the Americans sort of if they just swallowed that and they said, okay, no more Canadian oil, they do have the ability within their own borders to supply all the oil that they need. So that could end up backfiring in the sense that the Americans just wean themselves off Canadian oil and just say, okay, we'll just get it all from Alaska and North Dakota or wherever.
I do think that Trump wants like a lot of oil to bring down the energy costs. So I don't. I mean, to me, I don't see him cutting off Alberta oil exports because they do rely on a lot of that. So um,
So what's his rationale then? This is the mystery, isn't it? Because
yeah.
he already gets it at a cut price deal because for various reasons. I would say basically the American informal control of the Canadian economy over the years has given them this cut price oil, and now he wants to pick a fight with Canada. I mean, unless his idea is that he wants to somehow force Canada to buy $100 billion worth of American exports over the next 4 years, so that it could, in his mind, balance out the trade deficit. I really don't know
Well,
what he's going at, to be honest.
I guess we're going to find out more so here. Like it's only a week now, January 20th.
Yeah,
I think it's next Monday, right?
yeah, big moment.
And then the Liberals are hurting pretty bad in the polls and everything. They trotted out there one of their biggest assets, and he's been all over lately. And really respected on Chretien, and we had him here for Level Up. I got to introduce him, but they're trotting out what is it, Jean now? Like he's in his 90s,
91. Yeah.
and they're trotting him out everywhere. Like he's got a pretty tough schedule there, trying to like revive the liberal brand and saying that it's got to go more back to the radical center. He calls it the radical center.
No, it is a I mean, if he was just there and he was very much on the periphery and it was like, oh, look at this old timer kind of thing, then that would sort of be like, okay, that's normal. But he is really being wheeled out as a massive big hitter, isn't he? As a huge
Yeah,
asset
like
because they don't have the bodies, they don't have the talent, as they like to say in politics.
I
And
think
so
he
there he
is.
is.
He is. I mean, myself, I have a lot of respect for Jean Chrétien and what he did as the prime minister. Probably one of the better prime ministers that Canada's had. And then we got to meet both Harper and Chrétien at Level Up. You did as well. You got to talk with both of them, and I think both of them exemplified leadership, something that's been lacking for the last little while. Um,
Yeah, and he tells the truth, or he tells the truth according to his what he thinks the truth is, and he says what he thinks. And I remember during that interview, it was like I asked them about the cost of houses in Kelowna and how it's like excluding a lot of people. And if you ask a politician a question like that, usually they would list off a lot of waffle and be very vague and try not to offend anybody. But he just said, "What do you expect? It's a city by the lake in the mountains. It's beautiful. Everybody wants to live there. Go and move to," and I can't remember what he said, somewhere in Quebec. He's like, "Go and move over there. It's cheap over there." It's like that's part of his persona, isn't it? That people are attracted to. And I feel like the Liberals don't have another person like that, really, do they? And he's also got a lot of grit, and he's clearly a fighter, isn't he? And I
Yeah.
think people really admire that.
I think the only chance the Liberals have is rerun him. Because I don't see like there's been a parade of people out of the Liberal MPs saying they're not going to run, and it seems odd they're doing a story every time somebody says they're not going to run for the leadership. Like that seems odd in itself. But here is Jean Chrétien on like almost every show he can get on to talk about the Liberal brand needing to move back to the radical center, as he called it. But who in the Liberal Party that's running right now would fit into the radical center? Because they're far left, if anything.
Yeah, well, certainly it's hard to say whether it's right or left on the axis when it refers to liberal or hyper liberal. Some people would call the Liberal Party now, because they're not. I mean, yeah, they are kind of left on economics. It's a tricky one, but they're not like the old left. So I find that quite confusing. They're not like pro worker. They're not like
Oh,
hammer and sickle left, are they? It's a different kind of left, but.
and
Yeah, I don't know, though, in answer to your question. I mean, supposedly, as I've said her name a few times, Anita Anand, she's supposed to be pretty centrist and sensible, but she's one of those people that has popped her head up and said that I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to run. So,
she's not even going to run as an MP. And there's quite a few MPs now saying they're not going to run. I think they're looking at the polls and say, I don't really want to face the music that's coming.
yeah, and a lot of them they've been in politics quite a while. They've sort of served their time, and then they can go off and do what the next chap that we're going to discuss, Mark Carney, has done and make a lot of money in the private sector.
So Mark Carney, definitely not in the radical center. He is the one that loves the carbon tax, and he was actually he's being abandoned by the U.S. banks right now. Even BlackRock and them are pulled out, and quite a few of the big banks have pulled out of his net zero, you know, group. So Mark Carney being, left with his, you know, chairing nothing, I guess, if all the money leaves. And
Well,
it,
it's kind of, well, he's apparently still chairs the economic committee that advises Trudeau. I think he is still that's still happening, even though Trudeau announced his resignation. So there's one
So
there's one thing on his
I had a
resume.
question for somebody on LinkedIn that kept going on about how great Mark Carney is and all that said, and I said, well, then is he likely must be responsible for the GST credit on chips and tinsel, and because Kristen Freeland put some distance and said that it was a political gimmick, and she's like I guess was trying to say that it had nothing to do with her. So then because Justin Trudeau doesn't like to think about the economy, so is that Mark Carney's brainchild? And she adamantly disagreed with that. But like, whose was it then?
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of pressure on him to explain what his ideas were and which ones were implemented, because that is, I mean, in many ways, this election is going to be an economics election, isn't it? Which is often the case, but it's all going to be about the economy, and he's in a quite unfortunate position in that he was a senior advisor to the Prime Minister while lots of people are unhappy about the economy. So he's gonna have to explain that.
Two curious questions too. Justin Trudeau with his big speech on the election of Donald Trump, saying that America once again failed to elect a female president of the United States, and here he is supporting uh, Mark Carney to replace him, and he's not even an MP. He's not an elected official. So this guy could become the Prime Minister of Canada before we have an election as an unelected person. Again, kind of a coronation.
Well, they would have to slip him in a by-election, but the problem with that is how many safe seats do they actually have now? Because they lost that one in Toronto, the St. Paul's one, which was like one of the absolute safest of safe seats. So it's almost like unless Trudeau is going to resign from his riding in Montreal. But I've seen some polls that suggest that even that seat might not be safe anymore. So I don't know how they're going to get him in to the House of Commons.
He seems to be the front runner because Christy Clark kind of laid an egg there with her denial of being a registered conservative.
Yeah, that was quite agonizing to watch, actually, that little interview, wasn't it?
Especially
It
when
was
she accused
very painful.
conservatives of making it up. Like, you could say, well, I don't really remember. You could say things like that, but let's see their proof then. Let's see because they're making it up like fake news. That line has been used so many times. And then it turns out every time they use that line, I shouldn't say every time, a lot of times when they use that line, they are the ones, in fact, lying.
Yeah, well, it was almost like I think she knew she was under pressure in that interview, and that question was putting pressure on her, and she didn't want to really go there, and so she kind of said, she almost she like threatened them, didn't she? Or not threatened them, but she sort of like dared them. She was like, "Oh
Yeah,
well, I'm sure they'll produce evidence of this or manufacture it somehow." It's
that's
like
what she's saying.
that was a very bad way to deal with it.
She accused them of manufacturing evidence. That's what I mean. Like that's the step that she took like one too far, I think.
Yeah, and then obviously it was promptly posted onto X. Some activist or whatever, somebody in the Conservative Party
Yeah.
went straight onto the database, took a screenshot and posted it, but she didn't. And then Christy Clark didn't say that it was fake at that point. She actually said she owned up to it, but obviously
Well, she owned up to it
that.
in the
I mean, it couldn't have
typical.
gone worse, could it, for her?
Yeah.
That's terrible.
She owned, she owned up to it in the typical fashion. Misspoke. We've heard several liberals use that term. Misspoke.
It is funny that, isn't it? Misspoke, yeah, it's like that's a completely different phenomenon. That's
That's like
that
washing the word of lying, right? Like you lied, but let's use the word misspoke.
I've got a feeling, I'm not sure here, but I've got a feeling that that was kind of brought into vogue by Barack Obama, wasn't it? I feel like that was one of his classics. Like, oh, I misspoke there. But when you misspeak, that's kind of like when you accidentally say kind of when you say two words that sound like each other or something like that, and you don't mean to. That's
That's
what
right.
misspoke means.
But again, with her misspoke, like she went the step further by accusing the conservatives of manufacturing evidence.
Yeah. Well, and that's something that she should be asked about, definitely, because that's an extraordinary accusation that one of the two main parties in Canada would fabricate um
Right.
like evidence
Not only did she
to prove a
miss,
really minor point as well, a really tiny like
uh,
pointless thing that they would completely break the law and sacrifice any of their integrity that they had for that. It is kind of that's a pretty nuts thing to say, isn't it?
and then Justin Trudeau making the rounds. He's on with Jen Psaki, like a journalist for MSNBC. They're saying that it's not due to him that people don't like him or his policies. It's someone else's fault. He is reluctant to take any responsibility for where the Liberal Party is today.
Well, I kind of make a point. Well, I do it because of my job, I suppose. But I make a point of watching pretty much every single speech that Justin Trudeau makes, or every single press conference that he appears at. And the first time in God knows how many years that I've heard him blame himself for something or come close to that was when he resigned and he said, removing myself from this equation will probably bring the temperature down a little bit. But even that wasn't that was almost like blaming the people that hate him rather than
Yeah. No.
himself. But
Yeah.
it's definitely a feature of his character. And I think back to when those photographs were revealed of him dressed up as an Indian or whatever it was. I can't even remember what it was now, Aladdin or something. So I guess an Arab, where he wore blackface, as they say. And then he came out and did a big speech and said, we need to confront our racism here in Canada. It's kind of like that was the most astonishing for me. I think that is what blew my mind almost more than anything that he's
Well,
done in his whole career.
well, I mean, there's so many examples. We just talked about one. He accused American voters of misogyny, and here he is
Yeah,
has the opportunity to promote Chrystia Freeland, and he promotes somebody that's not even in the party. He promotes Mark Carney.
yeah. But I mean, definitely this idea that he's not, it's not his mistake, it's a mistake of others. I mean, that has followed him around for quite a while, hasn't it? And I think with some justification. And when he recently defended his climate policies, it was like a few weeks ago, and he was kind of saying that opportunistic actors have come in and like seized upon the environmental agenda and made it seem that that's making them poorer and all. It's a little bit tiresome. I think people find it a little bit, they're a little bit weary when it comes to that kind of
Well, I
thing.
mean, we can go all the way back to the COVID when he accused, the people that wouldn't take the vaccine as, misogynist, homophobic, racist, a whole bunch of ists. And then later on, after it's all done, he said he never said such things and that people had the opportunity to make the choice themselves.
Hmm. Yeah, and he's not the only one who's been accused of that kind of thing. But yeah, he attempted, definitely. I think we have to now say that it's unambiguous. It's not to be argued about anymore. That he politicized the the COVID-19 reaction from his government, the way that he dealt with the crisis, and tried to conflate the Ottawa, or not even the Ottawa protesters, but some of them, a handful of the Ottawa protesters. He tried to conflate them in their politics, which is quite right wing, far right, some say, with you know normal like civil rights activists and things like that, people that didn't want there to be a vaccine mandate in place and so on, like quite sort of abstract intellectual arguments about the nature of the citizen and the state. He conflated those people with people who are called far right, and that's probably going to go down as one of his biggest mistakes, I think.
Yeah, and then the National Post put out an opinion piece saying that his move to prorogate Parliament is only in the interest of the Liberal Party. I mean, that seems pretty obvious to everybody now. Like, even though Melanie Jolie tried to defend it with Vasi Kapelis there, but like, I mean, like, and then she just tried to brush it off and say she's only looking forward. She doesn't want to discuss what's happened, right?
Yeah, I mean, like I say, it's very difficult to think of who else's benefit it could be in who else that could benefit really, the prorogation of Parliament. I mean, none of the parties want that. None of the parties want the Liberal Party to be in power either. They've all pledged to vote non-confidence.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's very, very hard to make that claim seriously, I think. It's a very it's a very contentious claim.
And then a story came out that he actually was on the phone there trying to get the NDP and the Bloc to lengthen their term of government too. Like, he just won't let up, right?
Yeah, but like, if you try and understand it from his perspective, as I've said before, I think the Liberal Party in general is pretty upset with him because he kept on insisting that he was the man for the job, even though, they haven't led in a poll for like 2 years or something like that.
Yeah.
They've been down in the dumps for at least a year, 18 months, where it's been like double digit gap between the Liberals and the Tories. I think a lot of them think, why didn't you just go sooner?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of antagonism, I think, towards Trudeau within the party, and he doesn't want to, you know, he doesn't want to stab them again, and by leading the party into an election and being obliterated. Maybe he
Well,
thinks,
I
I'll
think
let someone else do it.
the Canadian voters would definitely see this as a selfish move, other than a few very, very faithful Liberals. I can't see anybody seeing it as something for the betterment of Canada. But let's move on to markets. Like, we've been talking about this for a while. Gold was up a bit. Now it's kind of like it's chopping in that range, continues to chop. I think we'll see some more direction here after the January 20th. See what some of those 100 executive orders look like, and we'll see what direction the market is. Bitcoin, they're testing that $90,000 mark after testing the $100,000 mark for a while there. It looks like it's going to build a base here. So again, wind in its sails though for the most part. But like day-to-day stuff and week-to-week fluctuations don't really matter so much. Canadian dollar continues to look weak. I was just in Vegas for a week, and it's weak. Like, you know what I mean? Two black coffees at Starbucks, Americanos, 20 $20 Canadian.
Wow.
Yeah, not cheap. Everything down there with the Canadian dollar was very expensive. Some of the stuff, like I like to eat breakfast it I make breakfast because we had kind of like a kitchenette in our hotel room. Um, but a loaf of bread there in a grocery store we went to, just an average grocery store, was close to $10 Canadian. So not cheap in that way either. Even for them, like $7 American, we're at $6.50 or something like
Yeah,
that.
it's shocking, really, isn't it? Not cheap and not high quality if the bread is still the same as it was last time I was in the US.
And then one thing I did try out 3 times, my favorite fast food. I don't like fast food a lot, but In-N-Out Burger. In-N-Out Burgers, the prices are reasonable and the burgers are outstanding.
Yeah. What is it called again? The double or something? That's
Yeah, the
the
double
main one.
cheese or
Yeah.
the single cheese, or they only make burgers and fries, right? So they're pretty, and milkshakes. So they're pretty good at what they do. Like they're
Yeah.
very. There's not, you can't get a lot of other things on that menu. No chicken fingers, no, nothing else. Just cheeseburger Pepsi, kind of the old SNL skit from way back when Dan Aykroyd and Jim Belushi were there, right? Cheeseburger Pepsi.
And also you get that no nonsense 1950s decor, don't you?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. But the burgers are outstanding. Like they are so good. My wife was like, "That's it," like 3 times, and he's like, "That's it. That's enough In-N-Out for me." But it was reasonably priced though,
If
compared
only
to
they
a lot
had
of.
them in Canada, but they won't expand, will they, beyond a
It
certain
sounds
geographical range?
Sounds like they are going to expand in a few more states now. It sounds like there is some expansion plans. They're busy. Like the store we were at, like if you believe it or not, does $8 million US a year.
Wow.
Not bad for a
And they're
burger
all
joint.
owned by the sort of central office, aren't they? They're not franchises.
Yeah, but not so bad for a place that just makes burgers and fries, eh?
But it's there's a huge business lesson to learn there, and I'm sure they study In-N-Out Burger on like business studies degrees. They must. But there's a lesson to learn, which is like just focus on what you do best and do it really, really, really good. And also don't overcomplicate things. Just
Well,
like keep it simple.
we're seeing that simpleness and the choices play out over and over. The Japanese automakers kind of like that too when they were dominant because they only made like 3 or 4 models of, like, say, a Honda. You didn't get a lot of choices. Like, in GM, you could like get down right down whether you want windshield wipers or this kind of windshield wiper or what. You customize your vehicle. And Tesla is the brand that kind of like followed like a Henry Ford model. Like, not a lot of colors, not a lot of options. Basically, that's the car. Take this model, that model, but not a lot of, like, building a custom vehicle out of it. Very simple.
Yeah.
Yeah. Makes it very cost effective.
Yeah, but it's good for it's almost like a form of advertising as well, isn't it? Because you get so used to like seeing and also hearing about specific models, specific brands. You're
Yeah.
not going to get distracted by, various different kinds. It's just like everybody knows the Model 3, don't they? It's like and I guess everybody in the 20s or whatever knew the Model T.
Exactly. And that one came in any color you wanted as long as it was black. That was the big joke. um, Lululemon in the news raises its fourth quarter revenue and earnings per share forecast. We talked about Aritzia last Friday. Aritzia blew away their expectations, and the stock shot up dramatically. Lululemon, again, they're going to report here right away, but they're expecting to do well, and the stock is responding to that this morning. Lululemon and Aritzia, both Canadian fashion retailers, right? So people seem to like both brands. Whenever you walk by those stores, they tend to have a lot of people
Mm.
buying stuff in them.
And that
Um,
is a proper value added business, isn't it? If you think about it, because everybody has access to the materials that they use to produce their clothes, but
yeah,
they do it better than other people, I guess.
yeah. It's in the merchandising. It's in, it's, if you like McDonald's, you know what to expect when you go into McDonald's, right? That burger's going to taste, pretty much the same no matter where you get that burger. And the same with Lululemon. The quality of the fabric is like, you're not kind of going to get surprised on what Lulu delivers. So,
Yeah.
In our AI segment, not really AI, but you talked about it, and it's like two of the starships coming back to Earth. Look at this. And this is not AI, this is not CGI, this is SpaceX showing you how to choreograph a landing of reusable rocket ships. Absolutely incredible. Reusable rockets
Yeah.
is the way to win the space race because it lowers the cost and can get us moving towards a moon base and obviously to occupy Mars. Crazy.
Yeah. And there's nobody really comes close to SpaceX, is there? They're pretty much in a category of their own.
I was at CES and went toured the Amazon booth, and I was in there, and then I didn't realize that Amazon also has a low orbit satellite thing where they're providing their own version of like satellite, like Starlink. And I said, "Oh, this is like Starlink," and then she kind of gave me a like a political answer, basically dissing Elon Musk and saying Elon only builds Starlink for rich people, yachts, and that. And I was just like, I don't think so, right? But she went off and how like theirs is about how helping people in rural communities and all that stuff. And I'm just like, wow, she's definitely not aware of all the stuff that Starlink has done.
Is that so is that with Blue Origin or is that separate from Blue Origin?
Yeah, I believe that's what Blue Origin is.
Right. That's quite interesting because obviously Jeff Bezos, the founder of both of those companies, is increasingly chummy now with
Elon,
well, Elon Musk, yeah, and Trump.
yeah, interesting time. In our EV segment, I got a couple of things here, and Elon posted this just to show you that we talked about simplicity. There you go. That's the simplicity of Tesla. You got your sexy lineup, which is the Model S, the Model 3, the Model X, the Model Y, and then joining that was the Cybertruck, and then the Tesla Semi. They're the big one there, and then front left, the gold one is the Cybercab. They did no steering wheel, no um, pedals, and then and behind it, that looks like a thing out of like Tron or something. That is the Cyber van.
Wow. It's very Art Deco, isn't it?
And then the new Model Y launched recently, and I think we talked about it on Friday. And it's got that light bar. You can see that the light bar on the Cyber cab, on the Cyber um, van, and then also on the Cyber truck. That's now on the Model Y as well. That front light bar. You can see Tesla's coming from a mile away with that light bar.
Is the truck, has that been released to the public yet?
The Cybertruck, which one?
The big semi.
It is. Pepsi and Frito-Lay driving quite a few of them, and I think they're going into some like bigger production. They were in a test phase, but I guess I've
Ah.
seen some videos on them, and the drivers of them would never go back to diesel. They say, but I mean that's from I'm not sure. We need to see a lot more of them on the road before we can really say where they're at. And then let's not forget, standing next to the Cybertruck is Optimus.
Yeah.
And robotics, huge thing at the AI show. I'm gonna put some packages together. Lots of robotics at the AI show. Lots of self-driving cars. I was in Las Vegas. There's a company out there called Zoox, Zoox, and they had quite a few driverless cars kind of moving around the city with a person still in the driver's seat though, but they were testing them, and they were at the CES as well with some driverless, like almost like a cyber van there. They had, like there's some stuff out there, quite a few things out there. So
Mm.
yeah, and then this with the fires going on in California, Elon Musk has asked people waiting for a Cybertruck delivery to be patient because he's sent an army of Cybertrucks all over California there to act as uh, energy and communication hubs. So the Cybertruck can plug in to your home and power your home, and also powered with a Starlink dish. It can provide communication because a lot of the communications were down, a lot of the electrical is down. So these Cybertrucks are actually acting as backup generators and as communications devices. So and he's got a fleet of them going out there to the fires.
And it's not he's not impressing the governor of California though, is he? He seems to be in open conflict with him at the moment.
Yeah, he's never one to shy away from accusations for sure. He's thrown a lot of mud at Gavin Newsom, and Newsom has thrown a lot of mud back. So,
Yeah.
and then our meme of the day. This is the good one. When you're grasping at straws, but you ban straws. I was in Vegas, and guess what they have there? Straws, a lot of them. I think I had plastic straws everywhere I went, and even Starbucks has like the thing you can't get here in Canada is the stopper. They give you that glue. Everything's about glue nowadays. They glue a little thing on the top of your cup. You just like, thanks for the glue, right? Glue, glue straws. Paper straws are paper and glue. It's got to be good for you, right? Because they soften up right away and they kind of like dissolve in whatever you're drinking. So you're gonna, hopefully that's edible glue. And
Sniffable glue, yeah.
I just don't use the paper straws anymore because like I've seen so much online saying like that glue that's been used to hold that paper straw together, not really good for you.
Yeah, I would say to go back to our beloved friend, Mr. Costco, I would say they get it right, where they just give it to you so you can sip it out. They just don't bother with straws, do they?
Yeah,
That's
and
probably
that's
more
that's
sensible.
that's what I do. I mean, I try not to use straws, but like I'm definitely not using a paper straw.
But you
Uh,
can't at McDonald's or whatever, you can't do that, can you? Because it's kind of you can't like just get rid of the straw altogether and still use the lid. You would have to just remove the lid entirely, wouldn't you?
and the thing about like say Starbucks, they pour a hot coffee into a paper cup. Well, it's not really a paper cup; it's lined with plastic, right? Because the other way, if it was just straight up paper, it would go through the paper in a hurry.
Yeah,
When you think about it, right?
definitely, yeah.
Yeah. So there you go.
Got to save the world.
Yeah, but it's a good meme though. When you're grasping at straws, and I think the Liberal Party is literally grasping at straws.
It's in a sense, it's kind of sad if you remove all the politics and look at it just on a sort of human level. It's kind of sad to see an institution or organization or whatever that is in so much disarray because it really is I mean, the last at least 6 months, maybe a year, has been kind of an embarrassment, hasn't it, in many ways from a policy perspective, and with things like that, the 250, I think it was, $250 check that they were going to hand out, and then all of a sudden that just disappeared. It's like, let's
Yeah.
not talk about that because
Well,
they failed in the Commons. It's been quite a shambles, hasn't it?
Grandpa Chretien should have come back sooner, like say like 3 or 4 years ago, and said, "Smarten up." And
Yeah, I'm sure he couldn't have done any worse than the current leader of the Liberal Party, I don't think.
he could have come back a little bit sooner and said that's enough, and shifted the focus because I think like I really see the Liberal Party as rudderless. Even their announcements, like the people coming out and announcing, "I'm not running. I'm not running as the leader." Just like these people are, you know. Anyway, we could go on and
They're
on and
going
on.
to have to reinvent themselves. That the party is going to have to completely reinvent itself. Similar to the way that, Trudeau reinvented it, didn't he, after Ignatieff and all of that sort of.
So,
And
if
and you could argue as well after Chrétien, he kind of reinvented it as a much more left-wing party, more like diverse and all the rest of it, environmentally friendly party.
if they care about Canada and not just the Liberal Party and themselves, they would call an election now and let people speak. Let the Canadian voice be heard, because that's pretty clear. The polls show that. And
Well, the, sorry, you go ahead.
no, you finish up.
I'm just going to say, like, we're in this very peculiar situation where the government has, in effect, collapsed. That's basically happened. But it's because of this prorogation trick, it's kind of a delayed collapse. And then also the Liberal leadership race kind of confuses it, muddies the waters a little bit. But what in effect has happened is the Trudeau government has collapsed in all but sort of, you know, the literal fact. And what happens when a government collapses in the Westminster system is that you have an election. So it is, I think it's a very valid point. It's
Yeah.
with people who are making that point, usually when a government fails, as this one has, as I say again, de facto, in effect, you have an election. That's kind of how it's supposed to work. So
Yeah.
it is a bit odd how they're clinging on to this fixed term situation. They're trying to like milk it for every last sort of drop.
Well, think about this. If this is the Starship Enterprise, and make this really kind of like uh, simple, the number one and number two on the bridge have both resigned.
Yeah,
Chrystia Freeland is also the deputy prime minister, resigned.
yeah, Spock.
Justin Trudeau resigned, and there is no one on the bridge.
Yeah, I mean, who would be in charge now? Is there even a Chekhov around? I suppose Uhura, is she?
Well,
Sulu?
I
I don't
think
think there's anyone, is there?
I think LeBlanc is supposedly, the next guy in charge, but he's probably wearing that off-color shirt. When they send you down to the planet and you're wearing the wrong color shirt, that guy's not
Yeah,
coming back, right?
the red shirts.
The
Yeah.
rest, he's the fodder for the show, um,
Yeah.
and nobody else. Jolie doesn't want to put on the shirt. Neither does several. Anita doesn't want to put it on. Like a lot of people are just like, no. Sean Fraser's like, no. Like, so there you go.
Yeah, they're not willing to sit in the chair, are they?
Mhm. Anyway, uh, good to be back in Kelowna. Good to be back. And we look forward to chatting with you tomorrow morning. And thank you for watching the Really Big Show. And until tomorrow.
We don't just report the news, we live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now, local, independent news.